So we're going to turn now to the measures on today's calendar. We have a special order of business that will be presented first. It's AB 2943 by Assemblymember Lowe. Afterwards, we will return to our remaining measures, which will then be heard in file order. Now, the way we do things here in this committee is that I'm going to ask for each measure to be, after the member introduces and presents their bill, that there will be 2 main witnesses, 2 minutes each for support. And at that point in time, we're going to ask people to line up at the microphone here, give just your name, your affiliation, with whom you're affiliated, and if you're in support of the bill, obviously say in support. Then we're going to take and have the opposition come forward, and similarly have 2 main witnesses, 2 minutes each for the opposition, and then have the opposition come up at the microphone, line up by the microphone, give your name, affiliation, and obviously your position opposed to the bill. We also enjoy people who are in strong neutrality. That's an option as well if there are people who feel that way, but basically we anticipate we'll have people in support and people in opposition. We'll give you an opportunity to give your name and your affiliation and then to indicate your opposition or support for the measure. So we are going to start with our special order of business, which is file item 31, AB 2943 by Assemblymember Lowe. And if you would come forward also with Senator Wiener, who is the, I think, principal co-author of the bill. Each will speak briefly on the bill, and then we'll have witnesses in support. And what I'd like to do is wait until everything is, we've gone through this whole process, and then entertain questions from the dais. So with that, Assemblymember Lowe, good afternoon, and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. I appreciate the opportunity to present Assembly Bill 2943. This bill is co-authored by all 8 members of the LGBT Legislative Caucus. I'd like to be clear to tell you exactly what this bill does. It declares the service of sexual orientation change efforts, also known as conversion therapy or reparative therapy, by all people in exchange for money, a fraudulent business practice. And it protects all members of the community. Now, let me tell you what this does not do. This bill does not ban the sale of the Bible or any goods for that matter. It does not prohibit free speech. It does not prevent anyone from speaking or writing on the subject of conversion therapy. The bill clearly clarifies what conversion therapy is, which is that of a fraudulent practice. Now, very specifically, there were recent amendments that were also taken, and let me also just highlight what those recent amendments were. The First Amendment clarifies that efforts to promote healthy sexual and romantic relationships without attempting to change one's sexual orientation are not prohibited under this bill. The Second Amendment clarified that this bill applies to services only, not goods, which includes books. So again, these amendments are clearly stated here in the opening and want to be very specific and clear on what the bill does.
And we appreciate your taking those amendments to clarify those issues.
Yes. Let me also state for the public record that I appreciate the opportunity for seeing democracy in action. I think it's healthy for us to continue to have an open dialogue and a democratic process and respecting various opinions and points of views. And with me are individuals speaking in support. But before I go into additional witnesses in support, allow me to introduce our joint author of this bill, and that is Senator Scott Wiener.
Thank you very much. Senator Wiener.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank my colleague and friend, Assemblyman Lowe, for his leadership on this important issue. I also just want to acknowledge that today is the 2-year anniversary of the massacre of 49 people, overwhelmingly LGBT, Latino people in the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. The hatred against our community and the desire to eradicate us, unfortunately, continues to exist until today. Colleagues, conversion therapy is psychological torture. It's a very simple thing. It assumes that being LGBT, being a gay man, being a lesbian, being LGBT is an illness or a problem to be fixed, as opposed to simply who someone is. We have a terrible history in this country and in this world of efforts, torture, to try to make LGBT people not LGBT. A history of lobotomies, a history of electroshock treatment, a history of institutionalization, sending people to mental hospitals in order to try to change us. This has been happening forever, and it shouldn't be happening. And I don't care what you call it, whether you call it conversion therapy or something else, it shouldn't be happening. There are people who want to erase people like me and like Evan Lowe, people who want to erase our community from existence, either pretend that we don't exist or actually make it so that we don't exist. It is shocking in some ways that in 2018, this is still happening, that this psychological torture is still happening. But it's important that we acknowledge that it is still happening, lest there be any doubt that with all of our victories as a community around marriage equality or whatever else, the challenges that remain. Frankly, this is why so many LGBT kids are still committing suicide, because we are told over and over again that there's something wrong and sick about us and that we don't have a right to exist and that we have to change and be normal and not be LGBT. You wonder why kids are killing themselves. This is torture, it's fraud, and I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Weiner. 2 witnesses to speak. However you decide you want to do it, 2 minutes each. Feel free to go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Today we have Dr. Haldeman, former president of the California Psychological Association, and Chris Bright, a survivor of conversion therapy, and also a senior trainer and education manager at the Trevor Project.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Is this on?
It's on.
My name is Dr. Doug Haldeman, and I'm the immediate past president of the California Psychological Association. CPA, along with every major healthcare organization in the United States, believes that there is no basis for attempting to change sexual orientation for several reasons. First, same-sex attractions and behaviors are not a form of mental illness requiring treatment. Second, there is no credible evidence supporting efforts to change sexual orientation. Third, these methods pose a substantial risk of harm to the individual. And fourth, there are other therapeutically legitimate methods for addressing the concerns of people who are questioning their sexual orientation. For 35 years, I have conducted research, written organizational policy, and maintained a clinical practice that included hundreds of boys and men who had undergone some form of so-called conversion therapy, and we say so-called because it is not legitimate therapy. From electric shock therapy to forced isolation to conventional talk therapy, no method is effective at changing one's sexual orientation and, in fact, usually exacerbates the person's already substantial guilt, self-loathing, and depression. Many patients reported that their conversion therapists pressured them to change their sexual orientation, stating that gay people's lives are invariably miserable, or the myth that they were gay because of childhood sexual trauma. If these kinds of messages are the free speech that conversion therapists seek, they should know that such statements in the service of manipulating clients is unethical. Opponents of this bill would have you believe that it infringes on the free expression of religion. It does not. Any church or pastoral counselor engaging in a non-directive discussion with persons conflicted about their sexual orientation is not affected by this bill, nor is a religious program with the specific goal of changing sexual orientation, provided that no money is collected. The only activities affected are those for which money is exchanged, putting an end to the conversion therapy industry in California. Placing conversion methods under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act serves to put the purveyors of conversion therapies on notice that they can no longer get away with profiting from preying on vulnerable individuals. And it serves another equally important function, sending a message to LGBT and questioning people of all ages that there is nothing wrong with you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Next witness, if you could keep it under 2 minutes, sir, please.
Chair Jackson, fellow members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts on this critical legislation. The Trevor Project is pleased to sponsor AB 2943. Following California's lead in 2012, there were 13 states that passed legislation limiting the practice on youth, but all states still allow this terrible crisis to continue on those over 18. As the leading national organization providing crisis intervention and suicide prevention services for LGBTQ youth, the Trevor Project urges the support of legislation to protect the LGBT community from conversion therapy. Conversion therapists falsely claim to be able to change LGBT people into straight and cisgender people. Every prominent professional health association opposes the use of conversion therapy, calling the practice harmful and ineffective. I am a survivor of the dangerous and discredited idea that a therapist could change my sexual orientation or gender identity. I was forced at a very young age to go through things that I'd rather not remember. I was made to put marbles under my tongue and to deepen my voice. I spent countless hours practicing fraudulent, expensive techniques that were designed to stifle my creativity and suppress my identity. I was taught that there was something fundamentally wrong with myself and that the only way forward was to mentally and physically tear myself apart. I was left broken and afraid. To respond to those painful years, I now lead the Trevor Project's critical suicide prevention and education training initiatives. We consistently hear from young people who are currently being subjected to conversion therapy. In new research released by the Williams Institute, we now estimate that more than 700,000 LGBTQ people will have experienced the horrors of conversion therapy. You have an opportunity to stop that number from continuing to grow. Conversion therapists are stealing from hardworking American families who are being swindled into falsely thinking that their children can change their sexual orientation or gender identity, but they can't change what we never chose.
Thank you very much. At this point in time, we'd like to call those who are in support of the measure to come up, line up here, give your name, affiliation, and obviously your support for the measure. So let's go ahead and start. Hold on, can we have the mic on, please? Okay, very good, thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. Joe Michael for Equality California. On behalf of our 800,000 members and our program, California Faith for Equality, we are proud to be a co-sponsor of this bill in strong support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is William Mutzenberg as an individual, and I've been asked by BAMEC, the Los Angeles LGBT Center, and Emily Ward, an individual, to urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My name is Kate Early, and I'm here for myself as a proud bisexual woman, and here on behalf of the Rainbow Community Center of Contra Costa County, the Desert AIDS Center, and the Orange County LGBT Center. I urge you to protect the most vulnerable members of my community and vote in support of AB 2943.
Thank you very much.
My name is Jason Chen. On behalf of Bay Area student activists, we urge that you vote in support.
Thank you.
Reverend Dr. Pamela Anderson, minister with Presbyterian Church USA, in support of this bill.
Thank you.
So send support from Our Family Coalition.
Much appreciated.
Jim Lindberg on behalf of the Friends Committee on Legislation of California, a public interest group founded by members of the Religious Society of Friends, in strong support.
Thank you.
Amanda Levy on behalf of the 4,000 plus members of the California Psychological Association, in strong support.
Thank you.
Mary Adair with the County Behavioral Health Directors Association, in support.
Thank you.
Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California chapter, and our 10,000 members, in strong support.
Thank you.
Lydia Bowen, representing California Division, American Academy of Pediatrics, in support.
Thank you.
Sharice Burns, California Board of Psychology, in strong support.
Thank you.
Eric Goods, my pronouns are they, them, and as the first openly poly, gender non-binary, and pansexual candidate in the history of the United States for Davis City Council, I offer my strong support for these efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair and members. Megan Allred on behalf of the California Medical Association in support.
Thank you.
Anna Johnson, National Center for Youth Law in support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Tristan Brown with the California Federation of Teachers, proud to support.
Thank you. Anyone else here in support? All right. In opposition, 2 speakers, please. Gentlemen, if you could give the dais up, we'll call you back if we have questions. Good afternoon, and 2 minutes each, although I'm going to give one of the first of you 30 extra seconds to equalize the extra 30 seconds from those in support. So whichever one of you talks longer, can't talk, it's all your call.
Thank you.
There you go. You're fine. Good afternoon. You're on. Nope, you're off now. You're on. Good. Okay. Good afternoon.
You know, the trauma of the search...
Before you go forward, give us your name and affiliation, please.
I'm sorry, my name is Elizabeth Wanning. I'm co-director of a ministry called Equipped to Love.
Thank you.
The trauma of the search for meaning and self-understanding in one's sexuality is central to AB 2943. One of the consistent messages I hear regarding this bill is that it will prevent suicide. I was one who attempted suicide, and yet my faith rescued me. I came out as a lesbian in my early 20s. 10 years later, I graduated from a Christian seminary that I attended openly lesbian. I became part of the gay affirming church movement. For my life at the time, lesbianism seemed to explain why I was the way I was. But my faith journey led me to question my sexuality as a lesbian, and ultimately my sexual attraction for men faded. I've been married to my husband for 13 years. I discovered and accepted that my sexuality is fluid, despite once believing I was born gay. I'm a pastor, and my ministry educates church leaders about the LGBTQ experience, creating dialogue and hopefully safe spaces. To the LGBTQ community, it's anathema to say abuse causes sexual orientation. But I was molested as a child and sexually abused by men as a young adult. None of the secular counseling I received removed the trauma of those experiences. By affirming my sexuality as a lesbian, that counseling never delved into under the surface of judgments and agreements that I had made that empowered the comfort I felt in the arms of another woman. My faith did. By blocking access to goods and services that question sexuality, women with Me Too experiences such as mine might never find resolution. Sexual fluidity is common among women. We've heard from men largely on testimonies in this regard. The APA agrees. California protects a woman's right to choose abortion, yet will the state now control how women must identify sexually? I'm asking for freedom to make our own life choices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Jim Doman, and I'm a pastor of Church United. It's a nonprofit in Senator Morlock's district. At a young age, I was attracted to men. In junior high, I thought I might be gay. In 10th grade, I shared with my parents I thought I was gay. I did not want to be gay. It was the first time I saw my dad cry. He cried because for those years, I carried this secretly alone, all by myself. His brother died of AIDS in the 1980s. At 16, I wanted to change these desires, and my heart ached. I asked my parents for help. After 2 years of therapy and 4 years of college, I chose to come out in 1997 at the age of 24. I met my partner of 3 years. He was HIV/AIDS positive. At the age of 28, we broke off our relationship. I desired to change my life. I questioned my lifestyle. I sought out a California licensed therapist and programs that would help me change. My previous therapy and programs had laid a foundation of understanding the root causes, and I wish I had more time to talk about this, about therapy and programs. LGBTQ, Q is questioning. Part of my story is questioning. How could California pass a law to prohibit questioning? To prohibit my journey, to prohibit choice, to prohibit counseling, to prohibit literature. I have nothing against LGBTQ individuals. We just invited a homosexual couple over to our home. They have the freedom to choose or question the life they desire. Why would you deny me the freedom to choose or question the life I desired? Please do not take away professional help and programs that have helped people like me. And like us here today, you'll hear from. Please do not pass a law that would harm a super minority. See my family right here? This bill says they're fraud. My wife, my 4-year-old daughter, my 1-year-old son, and the baby inside my wife's womb at 30, she's 32 weeks. She can't travel because she's high risk, are fraud according to this bill. I couldn't write my story. I couldn't sell my book. I'm writing it right now. And I want to help and be able to help others who desire change. The individuals sharing today are only a few of the many waiting to share their stories of change. And senators, I beg you, hear their stories of brokenness, of the sexual atrocities done to these people. It breaks my heart, and they've chosen and said, we want to change.
Thank you very much. All right. Contrary to the request, we're not going to hear a lot of stories, but what we are willing to do is those of you who wish to stand up and identify yourselves by name and your affiliation and then your support, and if you're in strong support, feel free to say in strong support. This is in opposition. Did I mention that? I'm sorry. And those of you who are in opposition, and you feel free to say strong opposition, but other than that, just your name, affiliation, and your opposition to the bill.
Madam Chair.
Okay. All right. Okay. If we could try to, I realize we have a lot of people and everybody is being very, very respectful, and it's very much appreciated. We want to hear and get your position from everyone here, but if it's quieter, we'll be able to move it along more effectively. So with that, good afternoon, sir. Your name, affiliation, please.
My name is Luis Javier Ruiz. I'm an Orlando Pulse survivor. I am an Army veteran and an HIV positive survivor, and I have changed. I oppose AB 2943.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Angel Colon. I'm a Pulse survivor, shot 6 times. It's a miracle that I'm walking. Found freedom in being able to choose my lifestyle. I oppose AB 2943.
Thank you, sir. Next witness.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey McCall. I left a transgender lifestyle, living that for years, and I oppose AB 2943.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Bree Stevens, and I was brutally sexually assaulted and went into same-sex attraction relationship, and the counseling I received, because it was so healing for me, I oppose AB 2943.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Ken Williams from Redding, California. I came out of homosexuality. I've been married to my wife 12 years, have 4 kids because of the resources
and you're opposed to the and you're opposed to the bill.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, sir.
My name is David Huang, and I'm from Senator Wachowski's district. And I'm a former, but I'm now a pastor, and I'm asking to vote against this bill.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Chris Olson, Foreman Lesbian Behavior, president of Coming Out Again Ministries, and I also represent 1,200 Calvary Chapels, and we strongly oppose AB 2943.
Thank you, ma'am. Next witness.
My name is Janet Mayer. I'm a concerned citizen, and I ask you to oppose.
Thank you.
Matthew Escalante, a private citizen, and I ask you to oppose 2943.
Thank you, sir.
Nathaniel Weisskircher, private citizen, Sacramento, and I'm in opposition to this bill.
Thank you.
Karen England, Executive Director, Capital Resource Institute. We strongly oppose. We support free speech.
Thank you.
Gina Gleason with Faith and Public Policy, and we oppose.
Thank you.
Pastor Jack Hibbs, Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, 10,000 members of Calvary Chapel oppose.
Thank you, sir.
Kimberly Zember, San Diego County, former homosexual, and strongly oppose. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Edward Bird, former homosexual and COO of Uprooted Heart, Inc., and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Qi Huang Feng. I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Penny Harrington with San Diego Strategic Forum. We oppose this bill.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dean Broyles, constitutional attorney with the National Center for Law and Policy, and I strongly oppose.
Thank you.
David Reese with the Living Letter Ministries. I came out of homosexuality caused by molestation. I received counseling to change my sexuality, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Leanne Reese, that's my husband. Our marriage was dependent on counseling. I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Doug Shorey, Laverne, California. This isn't about a bill. This is about control. I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Sandy Terosian from Fresno. I strongly oppose AB 2943.
Thank you.
Cecil Jackman. I have not identified as homosexual for 23 years. I have a child.
And you're opposed to the bill?
I'm opposed to this bill. I was raped repeatedly as a child.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please.
Hi, I'm from Chula Vista. I'm an Army veteran. I oppose this bill because I was molested and almost committed suicide, and God is the one that rescued me.
Would you just tell us your name as well?
Lynn Dow.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Joseph Dow. I was also sexually molested. I am a Messianic teacher, and I represent the Messianic Jewish Alliance of America. We strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Hillary Eyrick, and I'm from California, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you, ma'am.
My name is Amy Ahmet, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Gwen Gibson, Pasadena. I strongly oppose the bill.
Thank you, ma'am.
April Lockhart, Pasadena, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Drew Berryessa, Director of the Living Letter Ministries and pastor, 22 years free, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Jacob Casas, former gay identifying teenager, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Carly Fitch from Redlands, California, a former lesbian, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Hi, Lauren Hart, former lesbian from Redding, California, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Darren Mell, former homosexual, 12 years married with 2 children, president of Voice of the Voiceless, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you, sir.
Christopher Sims from California, found change through counseling, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Andrew Franklin. I'm a former homosexual, and on behalf of myself and my 1,000-member church that I'm a pastor of now, I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Yes, Christine Jackman, concerned citizen, wife of Cecil. I am strongly opposed to AB 2943.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mackie Diaz, former lesbian, strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Eric Johnson, senior pastor at Bethel Church in Redding, California. I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you, sir.
Candace Johnson from Redding, California, pastor of Bethel, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you, ma'am.
Cole Zick, Director of Moral Revolution in Redding, California, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
I'm Lauren Valentin, also a pastor at Bethel Church in Redding, California, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
I'm Jason Valentin from Redding, California, and I'm a pastoral counselor, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Charmaine Coulter, concerned citizen, concerned mother, and a concerned grandmother, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Eric Coulter, concerned citizen, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Beth Swan, I oppose this bill and believe in the right to choose.
Thank you.
Liz Flaherty, former lesbian, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Sarah Sumner. I'm from Redding, California, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you, ma'am.
My name is Jim Sumner. I'm from Redding, California, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you, sir.
Andrew Hewitt from the Bay Area, and strongly oppose. Ask for your no vote.
Thank you.
Pastor John Mitchell, Christian Faith Center, Orville, California, former bisexual, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you, sir.
Sherry Risch, Clovis, California, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Leslie Morris, Inner Healing Minister, strongly opposed.
Brenda Kono, leadership of Community of Grace in Hayward, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Christy Sterling from the San Francisco Bay Area, Bob Wykowski's district. Appreciate your service. Strongly opposed to the bill.
Thank you.
Dr. Laura Haynes, psychologist in Tustin, California, representing the National Task Force for Therapy Equality and the American College of Pediatricians. We strongly oppose.
Thank you.
My name is Monet Beltran. I'm a former lesbian. I found truth and support and true love. Please don't put me back in the closet. I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
I'm Nariah McCrae. I'm a part of the Future Generation, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brandy McCrae from Porterville, California. Jesus loves you just the way you are. I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
I'm Calvin Chang from Chino Hills. I'm a father, husband, concerned citizen, and a voter. I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you, sir.
Philip Escamilla, William Jessup University, in opposition.
Thank you. Anyone else here in opposition? Thank you, ma'am. Are there any other witnesses in opposition? Want to make sure everybody's had a chance to express themselves here? All right. Thank you all. Appreciate the way we were able to get everyone here to speak. And now we're going to open it up to the dais. I'm going to take the prerogative I have as chair to make a few comments so that when we do discuss this, we're all essentially on the same page and understand what this bill does and doesn't do. So first of all, as I understand this bill, and at the time of close, or perhaps if others have questions they want to direct either to the authors of the bill, and I'd like to bring the witnesses who testified in support of the bill, the two who were the witnesses, to please also come up so that we can have questions and have a good discussion. First of all, this bill is about protecting the consumers of California. We have a long history of prohibiting unfair and deceptive business practices and providing efficient and economical procedures to secure that protection. This bill is designed to target services that purport to change an individual's sexual orientation. The overwhelming evidence, and if there's a dispute about that, I invite a comment by those witnesses who are here in opposition to the bill, but my understanding is that the overwhelming medical evidence indicates that sexual orientation just cannot be changed by these services, and that there is no reliable scientific evidence that shows otherwise. But I want to, at this point, indicate and be clear about what the bill doesn't do, because I heard some people talk about the constitutional right. We've gotten a number of, I think all of our offices have gotten a number of calls and concerns that this bill will prohibit the Bible. This does not prohibit the Bible. It doesn't prohibit selling the Bible. This is a bill about services. So on the constitutional issue, which I know all my colleagues, and we've had hearings in this committee dealing with some very sticky First Amendment issues. We support the First Amendment right of people to speak and to practice religion, and there's nothing about this bill, at least as I understand it, that will in any way impede that. This is a bill that is targeted at services, not at books, not at goods. Books are goods. Services are transactions where someone offers to do something in exchange for some kind of compensation. This bill is targeted at that final element, that element of providing a service in exchange for compensation or remuneration of some sort. So this bill is targeted at services that seek to change an individual's sexual orientation. And we have recent amendments on the bill, so we've tried to clarify, because I know there have been some concerns. The language has been, for some, somewhat fuzzy, and I appreciate the authors taking these amendments. The bills that are taken in this committee with the good work of my colleague to my right here, who is our staff member on this issue, to make clear that this bill targets the services and not the goods. So Bibles are not being outlawed, they're not being restricted. They are, to the extent that people are inspired by them, want to read them, want to live by them. There is nothing in this bill, as I understand it, that takes away from that. And it doesn't prevent anyone from sharing religious beliefs or speaking on the topic that is before us today. It doesn't even prevent the ability to provide services. And you've heard many of you pastors talking about providing services that constitute sexual orientation change efforts, so long as it is not intended to result in the sale of services aimed at changing a person's individual sexual orientation. So I think that those are very critical distinctions that need to be drawn. And this is not, I know that there's some who'd like to cast it as a constitutional question. Someone was here on behalf of several constitutional lawyers on that. Again, we need to be clear on what this bill doesn't do as well as what it does do. And with that, I just want to indicate, and again, the scientific data, and some of us have looked very carefully at this because this raises a very serious question that I do think that the author of the bill and those witnesses, I think the witness testified, you know, for some people, this is a philosophical question. For some people, this is a question about who they are, who they think they are. And our society has acknowledged that there are people who have different sexual orientations. And in this state, we have worked very hard to welcome everyone. And as people of God, I assume that that is important to you as well. So the goal is to embrace everyone, is to welcome everyone, is to let people feel that they are among others who support them and will protect them and respect them. And the dignity that I've seen in this room today, I think, is consistent with that consideration. But there appears to be no scientific basis or method that these programs programs change people. In fact, in some instances, the data shows and the science shows that they can be harmful. There are perhaps other ways to address questions when people have questions of their own sexuality, and I'm sure all of us at some point in our lives, it's part of the process of growing up, have those questions. It doesn't say that those can't be addressed, and perhaps they're questions that we all should have the opportunity to discuss in a non-threatening way, and then to accept who we are, if that's who we choose to be, and to be able to go forward with our lives and to honor and respect each other. So this is a bill that deals with the selling of services that are designed to basically change an individual's sexual orientation. And that's my understanding of the bill. And perhaps to the author and the principal co-author, is there anything that I have articulated here that you disagree with? Because, again, I'm going to open it up for discussion, but I want to make sure we're all talking about the same things here. So is that a fairly accurate sort of summary of what we have before us today, Mr. Assembly Member Lowe?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. And I also want to recognize that we have practitioners, Dr. Haldeman, who's a practitioner himself, to also answer any of the questions that you might have with respect to individuals seeking to come to terms with their identity, sexuality, or any other services or help they may need.
Thank you. So with that, I will open it up. We'll start with Senator Monning and, or what, Senator Morlock, I think, had the first question. So Senator Morlock, then we'll go to Senator Monning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've got several bills today that we've already approved on consent that either deal with sexual abuse, sexual harassment, or domestic violence. So it's, I guess, sex is a big topic. And I have the privilege of serving on the Joint Committee on Rules Subcommittee on Sexual Harassment Prevention and Response. So I've asked several times in those committee meetings, what do we do as a state legislature to provide counseling services to those who have been sexually harassed? What do we do, because this is so traumatic? And I'm not Dr. Ruth. You know, I don't have all the answers, but I do respect the work of counselors. So maybe if I could ask a couple of questions. Mr. Doman, are you aware of services where there's a guaranteed result?
I do not believe there's any guaranteed result. I am not a professional therapist. Vocationally, I'm a pastor, and the counseling that I received from a licensed California marriage and family therapist as a youth and as an adult, I've never been told or coerced. I've said I wanted to work through my unwanted same-sex attraction, and they have only helped me discover and understand root causes of same-sex attraction. So I've never been told, if you come to our office, we're going to change you.
So I don't know how you refer to this person, but you didn't see an advertisement that said, come to our service and we will guarantee a result.
Correct. I'll say I was a vulnerable youth and questioning my sexuality, and what was wonderful is that a safe environment that a therapist allowed me to journey on that and not be coerced or told, this is what you have to become. I was never harmed. It never hurt me. It was my choosing. As you heard my testimony earlier, afterwards, I decided to come out.
So in your instance, you didn't go through a therapy program?
No,
or, okay.
No, I just met a MFT, a California MFT, licensed professional.
So then being able to just talk to a counselor, that's sort of your experience?
Correct.
Is that the same for you as well? Elizabeth?
I did not address my sexuality in counseling.
Okay. Then if there, if you had counseling, do you feel that if you discussed the subject of this concern, do you think those services should come at no fee or cost?
Well, I don't know how people would survive if I didn't pay, or actually when I was a minor, my parents paid the bill, or as a grown adult, I paid a fee. And I would like to note, I was suicidal as a grown man at age 23 or 24. I lived in Bermuda at the time, was accused of being a homosexual. I was a virgin. So I came back to the United States, went through a very severe depression, suicidal, could barely pick myself up out of the shower floor. That's how desperate I was. And the California psychiatrist was a homosexual man. He did not try to change me. He did not try to say, you're gay, you're born this way. He just helped me go on the path that I wanted to go. I don't remember his name, but I was a little fearful because I'm wearing a closed room anyway. But he just respected me. And he said, I can give you some medicine to help you. And he helped me, but he didn't try to tell me I needed to become a gay man.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Very briefly, we have other people who wish to ask questions as well.
Great, that's wonderful.
And we will get to them very shortly.
Yes,
so please.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other questions?
To the Assembly member, if I may.
If you, yes.
Assemblymember Lowe, I want to congratulate you for giving us the most phone calls this year on this bill. And this has been the longest list of witnesses in opposition as well for me, but and it was very geographically diverse. So my first question is, I'm trying to get to this claim that you will have a successful result. And so and maybe to use the word I'm having, claiming to be able to change a person's sexual orientation by advertising or engaging in sexual orientation change or gender identity. And that's called fraudulent. I'm just trying to get to that. And so if you could, if someone were advertising in that manner and they just dropped the claim, then they could still do what they're supposed to do, or what they do for a vocation. Is that correct?
Allow me to also, through the chair, allow for Anthony Sampson to answer into the technical natures of the question, but specifically it's with respect to very narrow scope of a financial transaction that is not consistent with what you heard before, as was outlined by Madam Chair, which is that it does not work, and that's why the California Medical Association, California Psychological Association, Marriage and Family Therapists all join in support of this bill, because not only does it not work, it is actually harmful and exacerbating such thoughts of suicide. And if I might add, what you heard about the testimony you just heard with respect to these two individuals testifying about their personal experiences, that is still allowed and is legal under this bill. Under this bill, it specifically is narrowly tailored to conversion, which is that you can be changed. But we've not heard any of the testimony to say that that was what was described in terms of their personal experiences.
So then we would want to discourage the advertising, but you are still permitted to do sexual counseling, because I certainly want to provide that for those that are harassed here in the Capitol. And that still allows for spiritual counseling.
That is correct. It is just simply the change efforts. It is very narrow in scope. So again, what you have heard in testimony and opposition of the individuals that have experienced their own journey, that is still legal under this bill, because what we've not heard of anything specific to those change efforts.
And if anyone makes a claim and you rely on that claim and it doesn't transpire as you had expected, you always have the remedy of malpractice litigation. You could file for your services to get your fees back, correct?
If I might, through Madam Chair, Mr.
Please.
Sure. Thank you, Chair, members. Anthony Sampson with Arnold and Porter. I would ask, Senator, you'd mentioned you're using the word claim. The bill doesn't require any sort of guarantee, and so the definition of sexual orientation change efforts is any practices that seek to change an individual's sexual orientation. There are then, there's a subsequent sentence that talks about acts that fall within the scope of doing that. After that, there's an even longer definition of what sexual orientation change efforts is not. In terms of the service, right, the act that we're talking about that would fall within the scope of this bill is advertising, offering for sale, or selling services constituting sexual orientation change efforts to an individual. So there's no discussion in the bill about any sort of claim or any sort of guarantee. It's merely the act of doing it.
Well, that's what I'm trying to pin down, because we're saying that if you're claiming in your advertisement that you can provide a result and you don't, then that's what we're trying to stop. And in the normal course of business, if you try to buy services and you don't get what you want, you can either not pay or you could sue to get your fees back, right?
Well,
That's already there.
if I may, what this bill says is it's not a question whether or not you're successful. You can't make the claim. You can't even advertise that you can do this conversion therapy, if I'm not mistaken. That's what we're talking about. So you don't need to come forward and say, hey, this didn't work and I'm going to sue you for malpractice. What this does is it prohibits any advertising, any efforts to exchange services or to get remuneration for services where you claim that you can help someone change their sexual identity, if that, or their sexual
That's right. An
orientation.
advertisement that says, you know, come to the law offices of Anthony Sampson, we can change your sexual orientation.
Right.
Right. We engage in sexual orientation change efforts.
All right, that's fine. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Senator Monning, is there anyone else after Senator Monning? Are we okay? All right, very good. Senator Stern after Senator Monning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to compliment you and your staff for your chairing today and the staff preparation. I also want to thank everyone who's come here today. I think yesterday we received just under 1,000 phone calls in my office, the vast majority in opposition to this bill. But I think with some of the clarification from the chair, and I'm going to have a question for the author, those that have rallied in opposition to this bill, you've already secured a victory with the clarifications that have been offered through the amendments. And I'm going to demonstrate to you the success of your efforts by asking the author, does anything in this bill prohibit the sale of the Bible?
No, it does not.
Does anything in this bill prohibit the reading of the Bible?
No, it does not.
Does anything in this bill prohibit working with a faith community and leaders or members of that faith community articulating their viewpoints or perspectives about sexual orientation?
No, it does not.
The vast majority of people who phoned and left messages in opposition with our office characterized the bill of doing one of those things that we've heard not just from the co-author, but also from the chair and the committee analysis. The bill does not do that. The bill focuses on a prohibition of commercial advertising, offering a service to promise to convert somebody to change their sexual orientation. We know from medical science, that's why the CMA supports this bill, the American Psychiatric Association. Those offers of a commercial offering of a service to convert a person's sexual orientation are not evidence-based. And this bill is narrowly crafted to prohibit what would be considered false advertising in the state of California. But it does not prevent those who are members of faith communities, those who provide counseling services within faith communities, or those who simply want to articulate their views from articulating those free speech rights and views. Mr. Author, am I characterizing that correctly from your viewpoint as the co-author of this bill?
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you for your efforts. I do appreciate the concern and the presence of those who have seen this bill representing something that it doesn't, and it's led to clarifications that guarantee that it won't have that impact. Madam Chair, thank you, and I'd be prepared to move the bill at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Monty. That was a good cross-examination. An old lawyer in you still, huh? All right, Senator Stern, a young lawyer.
Madam Chair, one additional question I have, but before clarifying that, I did want to say that I appreciate the testimony from folks who showed up here today, and the business of government is not to tell you what to believe or who to love or how to worship. It's very much not the government's business. There's a reason we have a First Amendment that separates church and state. And obviously the church has power or churches have power. There are a lot of different marcations upon that spectrum of how people engage in faith. I personally have a very close relationship with my rabbi, and I seek that counsel very privately, and I don't want the government intruding into that private conversation, nor my relationship with God. However, I do not believe that the government should stay out of the business of regulating business. That is somewhere where we do have a role and a responsibility to play. We do not have the business of regulating faith, but business. And so my follow-up question to Senator Monning for the author is that personal relationship we all have, or we all may have, with whoever our pastor or rabbi or cleric may be. Does anything in this measure prevent that kind of counseling, that kind of service, if it is not provided as sort of an advertised service, but as that relationship with your pastor, with your congregation, with respect to confusing thoughts you may be having or struggles you may be going through as to your sexual orientation?
No, that, as you've outlined it in that scenario, is still possible. And in fact, even if there was no financial transaction, individuals of various faiths could still practice conversion therapy, just so as long as it's not a financial transaction. So we still want to allow for individuals to have an opportunity to seek it should they wish to do so, just so long as there's no financial transaction.
And I do not believe that the church is in the business of selling prayer. That is a nonprofit enterprise, and people are not paid for their preaching, right, in the same way that for-profit businesses operate. So with those protections in mind and that preservation of the freedom to preach, the freedom to seek counsel, and the freedom to worship how you so choose, which, by the way I choose to worship God is not one where I'm seeking conversion of fellow congregants or from other people. I leave that freedom for everybody to live their life as they see fit. But with those protections, I'll be supporting the bill today. So thank you.
Senator Hertzberg, briefly, and then we'll ask you to close.
Madam Chair, I have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Senator Anderson and then Senator Hertzberg. My apologies.
You know, I also, you know, I don't want to be redundant here, but I think it's important to show respect. I can't imagine how hard it was for everybody to get off of work or to do what you had to do to show up here today. Often, being in the capital, there's 482 cities in California. It's a gigantic state, and I do want to echo what was said earlier about the folks as we listen from all parts of the state of California. It's very impressive that you took the time to talk to your government, and something that was important to you. You know, I took a look at this book you told me to do, which I promised, and I did. And also, I was given this May 7th, 2018 LA Times editorial, which had impact on me, that basically talked about how overbroad this measure was and the fact that it could in fact impinge upon the First Amendment. But the bill has been amended, just to be, at least from my reading here, it's been mentioned, but I think it's important. I want people to understand my view here. On May 30th in the Senate, just a couple weeks ago, and the probative issue with respect to change, I think it is the question of money. If there's no money, what's the power of government? The government can't tell you what to believe or what your pastor should be, or what your pastor says. The government has certain limited powers, limited to the Constitution, and I'm a big constitutionalist. But if you look at the measure here in terms of change efforts to which the author talked about, it says on page 8, paragraphs 1 through 8, under section 2, it talks about sexual orientation change effort does not include. It does not include. So to the extent that folks have an understanding, to which Senator Monning talked about, and I thought he asked the exact questions that I wish I was good enough to ask, but it says it doesn't include psychotherapies that provide acceptance, support, understanding of clients, facilitation of coping with, blah, 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 blah. It does not seek sexual change orientation. And the second factor here is money, the transfer of money. When you go pray at church, you don't, or in temple like I am Jewish as well as Senator Stern, you know, there's no cost to that. There's no charge for that. There's no invasion on that sanctity, which is when you listen to the folks, and all you guys, as we listen to people testify, and you could certainly say where people associated with a religious organization, we know that often that laws scare people, that they get pitched in ways that are extended beyond what they really are. Are they narrowly crafted with respect to what government's power is and what government's power isn't? And I just think that the fact that this is limited to the advertising, limited to financial transactions, clearly has very broad exclusions. You know, when I thought about this, and it's been corrected by virtue of what was in the LA Times, there's no question in my judgment that the amendment that you took dealt with the overbreadth, because I thought when I was given this that it really was smart. It was not by anybody who was an advocate, it was by another senator, because this is dominating our conversation. I was sitting in a committee that I was chairing, and another senator gave this to me. So in any event, we are taking this very seriously. I just can't tell you how important it is that you're here and that we take it seriously. But you know, as I balance this out, I'm a constitutionalist, and I don't think that this in any way invades the constitutional right of prayer. And to tell you what to think or not to think, it deals with commercial transactions and advertising in the commercial context, and hence it's appropriately constitutionally limited. So I wanted to share that with you because I think it's important.
Thank you, Senator Hertzberg. Senator Anderson.
Thank you. I just have a couple quick questions for the author. So conversion therapy is legal, correct?
Currently, for practice, as you know, in 2012, the state passed the law to ban conversion therapy for minors 18 and under.
But for adults, so the testimony earlier, your testimony was not, would not be illegal today. They couldn't put you through the marbles in the mouth and other items under current law, correct?
Currently, that is still possible.
Okay. So, so if you're an adult, because conversion therapy for minors is not on the table, and you are seeking that help, and we know the suicide rates are extremely high, why would we not want them to have access to care that they choose? Nobody's forcing them to take that, right? They're 18 and older, so no one's forcing them. And if they think that that's a path that's going to keep them sane, why would we oppose that?
Under current law, individuals are still able to seek any type of treatments or modalities that you've already heard from practitioners. But what we're saying is that when there's a financial transaction, we already know that scientific data has indicated that this is not only harmful, but it does not work. So under a financial transaction, we want to ensure that there are the protection in place for consumers in the state of California. But additionally, should an individual seek to be changed specifically, they can do so, but under no cost.
Well, it's not at no cost because you're forcing them to go to a synagogue or a church. You're forcing them to go, if they're an atheist, against their will. And you're forcing them to have this therapy by somebody who's not necessarily a licensed practitioner, right? I mean, licensed mental health provider. So to me, this is, you're really limiting people's choices at seeking help for themselves. On the flip side, if a person were to advertise helpful to those looking to question, would that be going over the line, or would that be okay?
Madam Chair, may I? Please. Mr. Sampson.
Please. Yeah.
From my understanding of the scenario you just laid out, Senator, that would be okay. Again, you need to cross over that threshold of seeking to change one's sexual orientation. And as Senator Hertzberg mentioned, you know, there is this long definition of what it does not include, and that includes coping, social support, identity exploration, so you can have these discussions. walk through it with a therapist, a pastor, whoever you need to, and talk about it, talk about your concerns, and seek some help. But again, the moment that that help crosses that threshold of seeking to change that individual's sexual orientation, that's where the provisions of this bill apply. But anything short of that is very much permitted.
So, through the chair, if I may, so if I advertised helpful to those looking with confusing thoughts, and they come in and they say, this is where I am and this is where I want to be, and because you're charging, you can't offer them the therapy that they're looking for, would you be able to do a referral? Would you be able to say, I cannot do it because I charge for it, but here are all the local religious facilities that offer this. Would you be able to do that under this law?
Yeah, because the offering of it, the advertising, it has to be in exchange for dollars. That is part of the Consumer Legal Remedies Act.
They paid for the appointment, so the referral into itself, though, would that lend that practitioner in, that provider in a lawsuit?
Senator, if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're asking by virtue of paying the individual who put out the advertisement for that appointment, the individual says, well, you know, I can't perform those services for you because you're paying me. However, you can go elsewhere, and let me give you a list who don't charge for it. If the money is again transferred to the individual who had put out that advertisement that you mentioned but never performed sexual orientation change efforts, then the dollars aren't being exchanged to the individual providing the service. So I don't see why that would be a problem.
But I would be leading to their service of getting the actual treatment, and I guess we would be testing this in court. So then the next question that comes is, you know, a lot of times faith-based ministries are laser-focused on whatever that ministry may be. It may be working with alcoholics. It may be working with unifying families after they're broken up. If they went with this conversion therapy, we know that sometimes licensed providers will offer services to their church to help. Would this put them in jeopardy? Now, I'm going to add a twist to it because I know personally that I feel very strongly about the life issue, and my wife and I donate to pro-life causes, pro-life ministries, for the specific purpose of respecting life. So if I turned around and got this therapy and I was so delighted with it, I made a sizable donation to that ministry. And that's a licensed provider who gave me that mental health. Would that now, where would that fall with this law?
I appreciate the question, and as you know, Senator, a lot of it depends on a lot more facts. But again, if you are going to, if it's a donation, again, if it's a donation and the purpose is not to receive, again, the dollars are not to receive the sexual orientation change efforts, and there's no nexus between the payment provided and the service received.
Are there any other legal services that we have prohibited advertising for in California like this? Is this, I couldn't find anything. So is there something else that we also, that's a legal service that we no longer allow to advertise?
So there's a list of about 27 items under the Consumers Legal Remedies Act that have been deemed by the legislature to be deceptive or fraudulent. That's again the act that this.
But those are legal services that you're speaking of?
Legal services?
Yeah, we established that conversion therapy is a legal service.
No, that's not what it says. They're unlawful services under 17200. There are 27 different kinds of business transactions that have been deemed to be fraudulent and thus fall under that provision. So that's the question. They're not necessarily legal services. They're services that are deemed to fall within the unfair business practice, which is what this is. And if I may, to answer the question, if you make a contribution to your church, that's a contribution. That's not a payment. There's a distinction to be drawn. So I think that answers that question. And then part of what we're talking about here is if someone were to hold themselves out as to be able to change your sexual orientation, that is what the issue is in this bill. If you make those representations, if you make a promise that you can change someone's sexual orientation and do so for compensation, that is the narrow restriction within this bill that would then bring into play the unfair business practices provision. So that should answer your question. So with that,
Madam Chair.
No, with that, we're gonna we're gonna allow Senator Lowe to we're gonna allow Assemblyman Lowe to close, and then we're gonna take a vote. We're gonna allow him to close. Excuse me. We're going to.
You want to have a deliberative process, but you don't allow senators to speak. Now, I have one last question.
You have asked many questions, Senator. Senator, if you have one, and you have had the last question. No. You are the last one to speak. So if you have a quick question, we'll do it, but otherwise, it's 4 o'clock. We have 12 other bills to do. We have given this a good deal of hearing. One quick question, sir, and then we're going to go on and have the Assembly member close. Senator Anderson.
Sadly, I have now forgotten it.
Well, perhaps there's a reason for that.
I know.
All right, quickly, sir.
Actually, Madam Chair, you might be able to answer this. So if those other 27 items are unlawful acts, this is the first time, I believe, that this is a lawful practice. We don't ban it. We ban it for under 18-year-olds, but we don't ban it for over 18. Would this be the first time that we have not allowed? Look, I get that. No one says, I'm going to cure you from drug addiction. No one says they're going to cure you from alcoholism, because it's a constant battle your entire life. You never get cured. You always work to be ahead of it. So the question is, if a person offers those services, would they still be allowed to offer those services, or is this the first time that we've had something that is legal in providing over 18-year-olds, but are not allowed to advertise?
Well, I think the distinction here is we're making this an unfair business practice that complies under the provisions of 17-200.
And medically proven to do damage.
And, thank you, and that it also, part of the reason that this bill, I believe, has been brought, and I'll ask you to close with that, is that the data all shows medically that these promises of sexual, changing of sexual orientation do damage, that there's no medical basis for that representation, which is the reason this is being brought. And with that, I'm going to allow the Assembly member to close. I've got to go vote. My other hearing that I am in is about to close, and I would like to go vote on that. I think we've had a very robust hearing. I want to thank everybody. You have been incredibly respectful. I, too, want to share. I think we all admire the fact that this is an issue of importance to you. I believe that we have clarified this so that at least 99% of the concerns about your ability to practice your religion, to read the Bible, to do those things should be resolved. And with that, Assemblymember Lowe, you may close.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members. I appreciate the dialogue that you have allowed me to engage with. As you know, we've come here with significant servitude, and I come here humbly and respectfully in talking to you about an issue that is very personal to me, in which we had all grown up, members of the LGBT grew up all the time. We didn't have the internet back then. I had no one to talk to at home, no one to talk to at school. and trying to find a sense of identity. I found myself wandering around aimlessly through Barnes & Noble trying to make sense of what it meant to be LGBT. No sense. And thoughts of continued suicide and looking for acceptance. And while we talk about the recognition that this is indeed harmful and hurtful to individuals, needs to be recognized. And under the state of California, let's call it what it is, a fraudulent practice. Under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act, we have already recognized as state policy certain acts that are harmful to individuals. And even if Californians wish to seek out such conversion, they still are able to do so, but with no financial transaction. This is about an issue of leading with love. And I think this is oftentimes lost in that conversation. That under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act, currently under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act, there's a section that says representing that a part, a replacement or repair service is needed when it in fact is not. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with members of the LGBT community. We should be loved, we should be celebrated, and most importantly, we should be cherished. And with that, I respectfully ask for a vote.
Thank you, Assemblyman Lowe. With that, the motion is do pass as amended. Do pass to the Senate Appropriations Committee. A motion was made by Senator Monning. With that, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Jackson?
Aye.
Jackson, aye. Morlock? No. Morlock, no. Anderson? No. Anderson, no. Hertzberg? Aye. Hertzberg, aye. Monning?
Aye.
Monning, aye. Stern? Aye. Stern, aye. Wachowski?
All right, 4-2, we'll leave that vote open for Senator Wachowski. Thank you all very much. We're going to take a recess while we clear the room. We'll hear our next bill in about 10 minutes. Thank you all for being here.